What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. Special episode you're going to have with an interview from Jeff. Now, doing just a quick intro. This video has been up since Saturday for our patrons, so if you want to become a patron, visit patreon.com/TCG Scrubs, and you can check some content out earlier than normal. Other than that, if you're trying to get the new set as well as starter decks for the new coming cluster, make sure to visit the link in the description below for Happy Little Hug Factory. And yeah, so let's just get to it. And now we're actually joined by Jeff Finnigan, our global liaison. How you doing, Jeff?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
We're doing pretty good.
Colin?
I didn't know.
Take the wheel. You got the questions.
Everyone was in unison, so I didn't want to be that guy, so I just figured it'd be ignored. But I'm doing good. We basically compiled questions for Jeff, as well as I think there's a couple things that he wanted to mention, if I remember right, as well. So it'll be a cool little discussion here that'll also help with some of this hype. This is coming out Tuesday, so there'll be some more spoilers that we haven't seen, but I assume those spoilers were super. We should have gotten the Egyptian spoilers, right, Oscar? So Oscar will
hopefully. I'm pumped.
Will be, if he doesn't seem pumped now, it's because he hasn't seen the Egyptian spoilers.
I'm trying to think. So the ones that'll happen right after this recording are green today, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, are we getting kittens?
I don't know if it's Chamimi or if it's Hanzo.
Oh no, it's Chamimi. Yeah, that's right. We got that spoiler image. That's fine. That's fine.
The Italian spoilers.
Yeah.
I got my machines. I'm satisfied from now on. Before we get started with the questions, was there anything you wanted to sort of intro or say anything?
Well, I guess I'll go over a couple of the things. So I did a Reddit last night for the first time ever, and that was a interesting experience. I hope I could answer some people's questions, but one of the big questions that keeps coming up and that I should probably reiterate here is that the enter tag change is going to be such that the old enters will now trigger from anywhere. So that if you reanimate Yogg-Sothoth, it will proc and destroy all the 2-cost or below resonators. If you can somehow bring back Nyarlathotep from the graveyard, she will do that as well. If you can reanimate Cheshire Cat, you will now draw cards, etc. So
that's crazy.
Ooh.
Abdul, the J ruler, is now significantly stronger. So that's if anyone still has questions about it, that is one of the big things I've read many people kind of discussing on all avenues of social media, and that is the official response on that.
It's a pretty hot button topic.
Yeah. It will not come into effect until the new set releases, and it actually affects some Origins cards a bit, and I'm actually super happy about that because it's kind of fun. I believe it's Morgan or Morgiana, I can't remember exactly, the 5-cost 6/6 that comes into play and kills stuff, and then when she dies, do more stuff. She's basically a one-sided board wipe now, so that's cute. But it's also it's an infinite loop if you don't have another creature in your graveyard, so there's some shenanigans there.
That's pretty cool. So it kind of shakes up all the Wander Origin format stuff that's been going on.
Yep.
And epic stories.
Yeah. And that change has been in the works since I basically joined the company. That's been a change I've wanted to make. But in addition to that, it will be interesting because a little bit later on, maybe today, I'm going to post an article about a little tournament series I'm going to host. So,
ooh,
that's a little extra, but that comes later.
What was the reasoning behind reintroducing the enter ability versus just having when this card enters the field and all that different stuff?
So, the twofold. First and foremost, I was just trying to make Cheshire Cat better. But in actuality, that argument wouldn't hold any water. And so so you guys know I also work for the casters team as well, in a much, I guess, with much less time investment than Force of Will. But one of the things I noticed was that the enter tag and other tags as well, like break, were being used in casters, but they had the meaning of the current Force of Will when this card enters the field effects. And so I had just made the proposal to the team that we produce both of these games. It would be much easier for a player to cross between games if the ruling on the card effects was actually the same on both. Of course, we don't use break anymore in Force of Will, so that one was kind of irrelevant. But it seems strange to me to have the enter of casters be the modern text of when this card enters the field of Force of Will, in an attempt to buff some of the older cards and to make Wander more exciting. I thought that would be a nice way to kind of join those two things together so that players could easily transfer between games and understand how things work, and it would be a subtle increase in power level to some of the older cards who have started to be outdone in stat lines over the years, and so this gave them a way to stay relevant as we go into the future.
Yeah, and you know, and streamlining effects and everything is always like, you know, needed.
Yeah, like I've commented before, I'm a big fan of like well done design, and that's aesthetics design, that's talking about kind of simplicity, how easy it is to understand rules, etc. Not just power level design, but in general making it so that people can cross over between games and they don't have to learn a completely new rule set.
Yeah.
So, along that same line, you had mentioned that that you had the brought up as far as like the interplay of casters and all that. So, like, what sort of input have you had for the new cluster
of Force of Will?
Yeah, Force of Will. Yeah, I should probably.
So I think I officially joined around Christmas time, maybe a little bit before. I'd been talking to the company before then, but like contract signed, etc. was around then. And I had expressed at the time, if you recall, we were in a Fox Prisia meta, and the game was not doing very well in my perspective, and I didn't feel like this was the pinnacle of what Force of Will design could be. And so I kind of requested that we go towards a more balanced like format where, and I think that word is often misused as like overpowered, balanced, OP, etc. Like, I don't feel like there's a common consensus of what those words actually mean, and so the Japanese team kind of expressed frustration with those kind of terms being misused, and then people just non-stop complaining, this is broken, this is overpowered, but not actually defining what those things were. And so that was kind of one of the first things that I did, was define for them what the balance that I want to see is. Now, as far as actual card effects, I don't do a lot of the designing of them. I kind of propose some ideas and they shoot them down, and like they send me a draft, and what I can do is essentially like give them guidelines for certain types of effects. So for example, if it hasn't been revealed yet, but you'll see at some point, there is an instance of a card where, had it not had any limiting effect, it would be an instant speed reoccurring discard effect. And I made a comment to the design team, this is not acceptable, and instant speed discard should be incredibly cost prohibitive to keep that effect from just ruining the experience. And I know, Joey, you play Magic, and so you're familiar with Esper Charm, and like that's a 3-color instant, and yes, it's a discard too, but as a 3 different colored card, that's not the easiest thing to splash, and we have very few effect. I think Funeral Charm as well, but like Magic has very few of those things, and I think that's a design philosophy they've learned well from, is that instant speed discard is not a fun mechanic, even if it's one of those, yeah, we can do it, but should we? No. And so those kinds of things they're willing to adjust on, and if I comment on like the overall arcing feel of a set, how does that work? Occasionally, like, specific cards will be changed around, but other times they'll kind of, we know what we're doing, you have to trust us, and we've found kind of a balance. I would still like to have more input in design, but I think the balance of it is they are the so to speak, they are the design, and then I manage the post, so to speak, so if they break anything, I generally deal with it.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah. What did you have any thoughts or questions on that, Oscar or Joy?
No, I just think it's pretty crazy. Yeah, I think it's great looking at getting a look into R&D and everything, and what that all entails.
And I liked your wording of that of the discard affecting the player experience, not necessarily just being like super, over, like you're saying with the term and stuff, overpowered and stuff like that, but like just the experience, I think, is a big part of it. And you can have stuff that's super strong by some people's perspective. Like I would say a lot of people would think Keurig and Lumion strong and stuff like that, but I don't think many people would complain too much about those cards because they're not necessarily ruining a gameplay experience. They're just strong at what they do type of thing.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, a perfect example, I apologize to use Magic again, but like, how many people in a casual setting have you ever heard complain about Tarmogoyf being like, oh god, this card's so unfun? It's just a very strong resonator, or very strong creature. But whereas something like Jace the Mind Sculptor, where it's a different type of card, the experience for the user, at least in Standard, was awesome, but for the opponent was generally this total feels bad experience. And I think that's something that design is still working around with, and I think we do an okay job, but we need to get better still, is that I think one of the things that Magic has done very well, that even Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon have still struggled with a lot, is that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, or that thing is fun. And I think even Force of Will pointing to like 1-cost counter spells, 1-cost removal spells, undercosted judgments. Like, yeah, we can do those things, but should we? Is the experience?
Would you say like an instant cast, maybe Time Walk might not be a good idea?
I would say the cost would be effective in that, because honestly right now being quick cast is a detriment to a card, because it means Feyer's spell is a 1-cost answer to it, and it's fairly generic.
No, I was just referencing Magic is having like a big issue with their buy box promo. It's I forget what card it is, but there's this whole shuffle around that. I did actually have a follow-up question that I had thought of, but if I kind of push it aside, you said that you like communicate to the team, not about like what's OP or what's underpowered, but you communicate, like, I forget the word that you use like exactly, but like you said you communicated in a different way that got across like what you want the game to be. Like, could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think on our last time we chatted, I discussed like what my ideal form of balance is, where we say balance, but what do you mean by that? And I made the argument that I like to see where rulers directly interact with one another's effects, and so that, okay, if we give one ruler a bunch of burn effects, then when that ruler becomes strong, let's give another ruler a bunch of barrier effects so that then those burn abilities become less powerful. But those let's say those barrier effects don't work on I don't know, creature attacks, or on discard if that says your opponent discards something, where that's a non-targeting effect. That kind of circular balance where it's not necessarily power creep as much as it is just shifting where that power is. And I'm a huge fan of that. I love when one deck does well, so then in response to that, the following event has a shift in that meta, so to speak, where the answer to the previous most powerful thing is now the new meta, and then some people predicted what the new meta will be, and so they're actually 2 steps ahead. And the way I kind of phrase that logic, I talk about this with my students about critical thinking, is, and I think we might have talked about it before, is if you play competitive Pokemon, and I don't mean the card game, but the actual game, let's say you have the 3 starters. You have Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur. And we're not using Megas and all the other extra stuff. But essentially, if I have a Charizard and Colin has a Blastoise, and from there, of course, a low-level person or a person thinking just about what's in front of them, Charizard is going to switch out. But when you look more deeply at it, Charizard has Solar Beam, so he potentially he wins the speed tie and uses Solar Beam to kill. Then there's also the choice of, what if I don't switch, I use the fire move and I get Hydro Pumped, then I die. But then what if Colin switches and he goes into Venusaur? Now I've used Solar Beam and he switches into something that it's not very effective against. So, and then he can, let's say, Mega Evolve, and then he has protection from fire. So the better move there would then be to use Flamethrower or Fire Blast in response. So part of it is having the accessibility of your deck, in this case, or your Pokemon, has the moves to accommodate for the different options, but then you also need to account for the mind games, and I'm a big Melee player, as you guys know, so mind games is a big piece of that. It's, you have the physical tools, but then you also need to make the decision of what to use. And my logic in our game has been, I want the game to be accessible. Like, you know, we've made it so that with 3 boxes or so, you can basically have a playset of most everything. That, in conjunction with easier ruler access, means anyone can play most any deck. I mean, maybe not pimped out, but you'll have a playable version of a deck. And then from there, you're able to kind of use your own analysis of the metagame to determine what's the best play. And that, to me, is the essence of healthy competition, where there's one aspect that is... But anyway, so just the expressing that kind of balance where you have... Because I feel like, I'm going to go off topic for 2 seconds, but like, I feel like in Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! One of the big issues is the card cost. It directly affects the availability of certain decks, and then the meta is affected more so by the bank accounts of players rather than by what the meta call should be. And so I think in that regard, you see Force going into the future having a super healthy meta where the and it can be a drawback too to actually highlight players' ability to show their metagame analysis, because honestly the average person isn't that good, and that's okay. But coming to terms with that and seeing that maybe gets highlighted in a different way, and then that can sometimes feel bad as well. But I think that's the definition of balance that I want to move towards, where we encourage everyone to get better. And I love when people do like the metagame analysis, like Brandon Bremont did one recently, and we've had Ben Bergazzi do one before. And I like when people take a second, think about it, because a couple years back when White Book had just come out, Book of Hope, I had assumed that at the GP that the smart players would be using Mikage. I think this was during Faith thing was still kind of popular, and so I assumed that Mikage would become very popular to deal with all the resonators. And so my assumption was that if Mikage was going to be the popular deck for the good players, and I could beat most of the casual players just with being a decent player, I would play a deck that could beat Mikage. And so if you remember, Grim had a barrier giving effect to all your resonators, and with Earth in combination with Prisia, you could mess up the field pretty quickly. And I ended up getting, I think, like 11th or something, or doing pretty well with... I was the highest placing like tier 1, tier 2 deck in the event, and this is when Tokyo GP still had like 60, 70 people, and I was really proud of that, and I ended up getting the place I got because I didn't expect any tree, and this was when Evil Tree had come out, and that deck was totally off my radar, and my last 3 matches were against it, and the first round I lost to it, and the second two I lost to the first one, I drew to the second, and I won the third, so you could kind of see this learning process as I was going through, because I hadn't really played against it. And so by the end I was a lumberjack, but it had taken me some time to kind of learn that matchup mid-tournament. But going back to that, just the idea of understanding the metagame and being rewarded for that by choosing the appropriate deck, I think that's a good kind of balance. Not just, hey look, I put the most powerful cards together in a pile and pretty much nothing else can beat this, so it's just going to be who makes a play mistake. And after 8 or 9 rounds, everybody makes a couple mistakes. So that's my input on that.
As a side note, I was going to say, because you were talking about the back and forth with the rulers, and I turned out to be, I'm actually really excited for the new cluster because of that sort of blank ruler side and pretty low power J ruler side, sans having runes in there, but it just reminds me of when I was first playing, and like I didn't even really pay too much attention to the J ruler. I just tried to make a cool deck, and then if I got in a tight spot, then I would judgment and read what my J ruler actually did and stuff like that. So I'm excited for that, of building a deck not around the ruler, but inserting the ruler inside of whatever deck you might make. It seems like what could be going forward, what we might see, which I think is really cool, because it adds more diversity to the decks, because you're not reliant on a passive ability of the ruler or something like that, which requires dolls or having a certain resonators in there that would blink or different things like that.
Absolutely. I think that this goes into a major not issue, but just something I've picked up on this week, is that players are not used to the new form of card analysis, where we're so accustomed to looking at a ruler, how powerful is this ruler? Who cares? Like, the support will come after. How generically powerful is this ruler, and how does it affect the metagame? And because that's not how it's going to work going forward, and most of the runes haven't been shown yet, players have no idea what kind of ruler support looks like at the moment, and it's so much more powerful, or not powerful, it's so much more important than it's ever been in the past, where I was on Reddit last night, and people were getting pretty upset that, like, Days of a Powerless Dragonoid were like, it completely nullifies Arthur, why would you ever play him? And I had to make the comment of, it only affects the J ruler, and honestly, unless you're running a deck around, like I heard you guys joking around about kind of the get your 10-drop golems, put them on top, and swing for 2,000 kind of thing. I love that you can do that. Like, you can make that kind of Arthur deck if you want in Wander. Or, like, obviously the New Frontiers version, or even the cluster version, is a little bit different focused, and people have commented, well, what the heck, you can just lorite the enter effect, and it's like, okay, but no one said you're just turbo judgmenting. That's not the goal. And for Arthur, honestly, as the article said, like, judgmenting used to be kind of your last resort thing. It wasn't just turbo judgment. I think Valentina is kind of, and Bahamut are the people who kind of started that feeling, and we've been in that for a while where, like, look at Shahrazad. She has, I think, 5 abilities on the backside and 2 or 3 on the front, let alone the stories. So people's analysis has been the most powerful J ruler is the most powerful card. And you're going to see that change. But because we haven't revealed enough and because people haven't maybe necessarily made that connection yet, the card analysis is way off right now. And that's okay. That's totally fine. That's part of the fun. Honestly, spoiler season is the most stressful but the most fun for me because I've been looking at these cards for months. And so now I get to see stuff like, honestly, the community finds stuff in a couple days that it took me forever to see. And there'll be things that I found a while back and it'll probably take you guys a little while to see. Nobody kind of commented on some things that I thought was a huge threat at first, and then it became like, oh wait, when I tested it, I was like, actually this isn't that bad. But there's so much that's changing. I keep saying this apples to oranges, that people have commented like, well, what about the old rulers and the new rulers and how are they going to relate to each other? And it's so complicated. It's not a simple, oh, well, the old rulers are just going to throw this stuff in the deck. As you've seen, some of the stuff you need runes to activate. Well, okay. I think we haven't quite, as a player base, established what the baseline is. And so we're used to, in current New Frontiers, you put the best cards of the best colors that fit into your deck, and there you have it. There is your New Frontiers deck. That is going to be changing, and I think that drastic change will affect how people build decks. Now, the goal is not to power creep the old cards, nor is it to make the new cards so weak that they're not playable. As we said before, the idea is to move the power around, so there's different reasons to play different things. If we're always just power creeping the old cards, then we're going to turn into Yu-Gi-Oh! And have to change the entire core system of the game every couple years. If we go the kind of Magic route, that they started out crazy strong and then got super weak, and now they've kind of been going the opposite direction. And I was actually looking at the most popular Magic cards in different formats recently, and so much of the old formats now, all the creatures are from like the last 5 years, and all the spells are from 10 plus years ago. And so we're kind of seeing that type of thing in those games. Yu-Gi-Oh! It's basically old popular things and then new powerful cards, but I think Force is trying to find that balance where you can use the old stuff and it's still viable and it's still good, but the new stuff is going to have other effects and other things that make it so they're not a direct comparison. So you're not in the wrong for choosing the new, but you're not in the wrong if you want to keep playing pandas or something either. So that,
well, you are wrong for playing pandas.
I had some Germans stop by Tokyo last weekend, and I was playing Welser, and they were playing pandas. And what else was I playing? Oh, yeah, my current New Frontiers deck is actually a Umer combo. So the poor guy didn't know what I was playing. He thought I was playing like an aggro Charlotte list or something, or it's Scarlet, and I was like, turn 2, energize, you're dead. He was like, oh, really? All right, next game.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I'm surprised people haven't learned that by now, especially as far as just waiting to see all the cards before deciding what rulers might or might not be good. But because we had that similar situation back with Fox, where everyone thought that ruler was unplayable, and then with that, yeah,
Griffin.
Yeah, Griffin all of a sudden at the last second was like, oh, hi. And it was like, oh, this is actually probably one of the strongest rulers in the format. Just that one card difference was all it took. Mm-hmm. And especially with how the rune system works and the support system, I assume it'll be similar stuff. And speaking of runes, also, because this keeps popping up, would you want to briefly just clarify how runes work, how you activate them, and how that affects the rest of the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Alright, so you have Divinity 10 on your ruler. You have your 5 starting runes that you've selected. The total of those runes can be any number you want. You could have 5 different 10 cost. There is no Divinity 10, but for example, let's say there was. You could have 5 different ones face down, and that would be no problem. How it's going to work is you essentially activate them like you would any other card. You pay your stone cost, and instead of revealing from your hand to cast a card after you've paid its cost, you flip over that rune as a part of that cost. Like, you can't play a spell that's in your graveyard, right? You can't play a spell that's on the chase again. What you do is you reveal that rune, and part of that being, if you have the open divinity left on your ruler, so that your total revealed divinity is less than 10, so you have the divinity available, you have the ability to flip the card over, you've paid the cost, then that divinity card flips over, and a copy of that chant, rune, whatever, goes onto the chase. The reason it's a copy is because if the physical card went onto the chase, then there would be a time, or I guess a moment, where that rune is on the chase, where it would not be in your rune area face up, and so the divinity cost could be kind of played around. And so the way of using a copy of the chant forces that there will never be any instant when the divinity of that card is not being counted. And then, should the effect be countered or played, whatever, it happens, and you continue on with your lovely day. Does that answer your rune questions?
I think so. Oscar, did that answer some of the ones that we had been getting?
Yeah, it was kind of concern about people who were afraid that you would reveal it. I think keep playing the revealed one type situation. They weren't sure how it worked exactly. If it was just like the way Grimoire was, revealing it, paying it on the spot, and once it was revealed, you can no longer play it again type situation.
That's no. If a rune is face up, it may not be cast again.
Yeah.
So the runes being cast, or cast just not from your hand, right? So like things. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Does it function differently in your deck at all, or will a rune / chant just be like a chant in your deck?
A rune / chant is exactly what you said. It is a chant with a subtype that inside of the deck does nothing different besides it can be affected by cards that affect runes. And so, for example, and this is something that I don't know if I think we've kind of hinted at it, but a card with only rune, or what will be referred to as master rune, can only be played in the rune area.
Okay. For example, if you had a resonator that says whenever you play a rune, it gets plus 100, the runes from your deck would also activate that.
Yes, they would trigger that as well.
But the rune 3 or the rune 4 doesn't count stuff played. It only counts stuff in your rune deck. Area,
yes. Yeah. So, for example, and so that's actually one of the inherent balances of the rune effect of, for example, how many are face up, is that there's no more Shahrazad to just flip them over for free. Now, there are some that you might, like the barrier rune, if you want to just play free runes that don't do anything or have very minimal impact just to have that rune ability, you can do that, but you're obviously going to be having a less effective rune deck for the trade-off of triggering those runes early. Whereas, so let's say you have a rune that is white, white, white. So that means you have to have 3 white face-up runes in order to get that ability. And so essentially there is a delayed cost, or an echo cost almost, to activating those effects. And in that way, like, Legend was obviously a bit broken, like, because there, especially pre-ban list, there was an incentive to just turbo flip as many over as possible, and that was actually something that, even to this day, when I play Shahrazad, and when I tested with Shahrazad, obviously, like, that stuff had already been sent to the printers when I joined the company, but, like, my even logic when I was using Shahrazad was, I'll use the stories as I need them, rather than just turbo them all out as fast as I can, and then get the Grimoire 5, or Legend 5 abilities. And what we've done this time is kind of learn from that mistake, that now the only way you're flipping those cards over is if you're actually casting the cards, which actually you'll find, like, I'm expecting there are a couple runes that have a very low or reduced cost in the rune deck, but you will find that one of the limiting factors is certain targets have to be available in the game, so that you can't just, because actually I was going through, like, alright, turn 1, if you just want to run as many cheap and or free runes as possible, can you do that? And, like, the limiting factor, there's a couple that you can play, like, you can give yourself Barrier just for the sake of it for a turn if you want, but then I also commented, like, that might not be the most effective use of your rune deck, because if you're gonna kind of piss them all away as fast as you can just to activate that, I might get farther ahead in advantage by actually using real runes that do things. And I think that's one of the big advantages of runes, as well as Sherries were specific counters to specific types of decks, whereas runes are useful spells that you would actually want to cast, but in the current game you might not cast a spell like that because it's either too expensive or you can't justify putting it as a main deck card, but always having access to it, even if it's a little bit expensive, is a nice way to play it. It diversifies the game feel to some degree.
I really want to start grilling you, because I noticed you mentioned, like, rune, white, white, white. So does that mean we're going to have, like, multicolor, rune abilities, like, on resonators and stuff? Like, and I just want to keep going and, like, try and dig deeper, see what I can pull out. But, I'm not, like, and I want to ask you, like, how many quick casts, how many non-quick casts, but that's take too much time, and I'm sure you can't answer half of them. But
the specifics, I can't answer. I'm glad you assume that I'm able to memorize the amount of quick casts and whatnot. But
so he's like, doesn't everyone do that?
Yeah, doesn't everyone? And to be honest, when I'm in, like, designing mode, I go through all the old, like, from Grim forward, I've gone through, actually from Valhalla forward, I've gone through and mapped out how many super rares are resonators, how many are editions, how many are instants, etc. But just to kind of get a feel. But that's kind of for my own design stuff. But as far as how rune works, yes, there is a difference between rune number, like rune 3, where it would be generic. Or you guys did the bunny that's rune 2. That's too generic. Whereas rune white, white, white means it has to be 3 white runes revealed. And so cool. The idea is that there's design space there we can push you to go in 2 different directions then. You can have a deck where you're really emphasizing the rune deck can be kind of focused to specify what you want to do with your deck. And that's the big push that I've been pushing for as far as a gamification kind of thing, is you want to build a player's relationship to their deck. You want their choices to be reflected in the construction of their deck. Now, of course, in competitive, we will see, like, the min-maxing of that, but honestly, like, I'm so excited for the WGP to see people, what they're building with no prior experience. Now, of course, the world's pros are going to communicate and probably break the format, but that's kind of to be expected. That's why we give them a format that no one else really plays, in order to break it and teach us some things too. So I really enjoy that. So it gives you different reasons to run different rulers, even of the same color. And Master Runes will do that as well. And so kind of reasons to run Brunhild over Adam, or Adam over Brunhild, etc. kind of thing. Besides just their J-ruler effects, but also the runes they have access to are maybe interesting and unique. And yes, I'm purposely not going into detail of what Master Runes are. So, yeah.
We should probably do more questions, because I have more questions I want to ask, but.
So another question is regarding some. Actually, I think there's just a post in the US group today about it. So, will Wander be getting more events in the future and/or support now that we're approaching a new cluster and all that type of stuff?
So, I've talked about it officially with the company, and the reality of it is that in Japan, Wanderer is less than nothing. And so that's a good and a bad thing. The good side of it is they don't then raise too much of a fuss when I want to make changes to the format, or when we need to make adjustments, or just in foreign countries if we want to have some kind of Wanderer extra event. Now, what that means as far as GPs, we're talking about kind of a new type of format for the GPs, and so the HQ version of it is they want to specifically focus on New Frontiers. I would love to see at least one Wanderer GP per region per maybe 6 months or so, but I don't know if that's completely feasible within the company's official GP events. I would like to see that be, and maybe if there are kind of GPs or larger events that are not GPs, we can have those be kind of sponsored events or something like that, but still working out the details. Obviously, you guys know I love Wander. That's part of the reason I pushed for the interchange and everything else. But I think that because it's not a thing in Japan, and of course, Edgy knows about what's going on in the rest of the world, but some of HQ really focuses on Japan, and so they might not see the drive or the push for something like that outside of smaller 20-man, 30-man events that we might be able to host. So that's kind of the Wanderer situation. I love having a chance for people to really get out there, play with their old cards, and I'm a Legacy player. I love Eternal Weekend. I think that's awesome. I love having people have a chance to use their old cards. But at the same time, I do think New Frontiers is going to be really good, and I actually think Europe has been doing a lot of cluster, and I haven't really been a fan of Rhea cluster, but I think New Dawn or New Valhalla is actually going to be an awesome format to play cluster events in. So I've talked a little bit about that, but again, I don't know. I don't think early on cluster events are ideal over New Frontiers, just because the card pool is so limited. You're of course going to kind of hit a wall fairly quickly, whereas once there's 2 or 3 sets, then cluster tends to get more exciting. I think New Frontiers is going to kind of be more interesting for the first couple months, and then people might still want to try with their friends cluster, and I honestly have no problem with that, and I think it's actually very fun too.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever done cluster before. I really like playing whatever the main format is, so I've usually stuck with New Frontiers inside of Force Will, and only the most I've done is Epic Stories as far as other stuff. So what? Let me find a good one here. What? What were your favorite parts and cards of the Rhea cluster now that we're moving into a new cluster?
So I'll go down by a couple different categories. Aesthetically, I love Dark Elves. I love Freyla. I love all the Ishisho artwork is just my jam. And I loved the idea of kind of, there was the haste death touch resonator that I thought was really cool. I liked the at the end of the turn you take one or both players take one, like that kind of slow burning of both players kind of thing. That kind of effect I thought was really fun. I was really disappointed actually that there was a I think it was an R2 maybe. There was a 4 cost that got, when it came in you lost 1,000. When it left play you gained 1,000, and it did some other effects. And I understand what they were doing with that, but inside the current game, like I know 4-drop 1,000 is kind of our new standard and whatnot, and even maybe a little bit above the curve, but in the current game, cards that have a real drawback don't stand a chance when you have a card like Mariabella that's just vomiting upsides. Like, you can't have a fair and balanced 4-drop in the same game, basically, and have any real reason to run that fair 4-drop when you could just run the crazy broken thing and just be rewarded for that to the nth degree. So, love Dark Elves. I loved Welser. I think he's awesome. I was really, even before I was working at the company, I really liked him. I was disappointed that they didn't make dual attribute crests so that he could be judgmented easier, because I think that was his biggest drawback, was flavor-wise, totally understand, and I think he is a ruler that like leaks flavor so much, and it's really cool. It's just too bad that he ends up becoming non-viable because of that, and him losing his will fixing on his flip side is a real detriment to the 5 color of his front, where the deck kind of pushes you to run 5 colors, but then as soon as you judgment, you're kind of screwed if you didn't play all 5 beforehand. And that, I feel like, is a design mistake, similar to Grizzlebrand costing 8, and where, like, aesthetics really do matter, but then you also need to consider the playability. But, like, I don't know if it's common knowledge, because I don't know how many people play Welser, but, like, Welser has an OTK as long as you can, like, his board wipe will finish it. Essentially, you need to play Freyla, Judgment with Welser, and then drop in Beelzebub, and then swing with Freyla, giving Beelzebub the swiftness and +4. There's your 6 damage. Then swing with Beelzebub in the air, removing the counters, putting them on Freyla, or one of their resonators to kill them, is 19 damage, putting you at 25, and Welser is actually the last 15. So he has, like, a 2 will potentially OTK if the board is empty. And so, like, those things exist, but compared to some of the other things that decks were doing that were just more unfair, they could judgment faster, etc., that was kind of the trade-off. Now, the cool thing is, that's a completely swiftness OTK, as long as you have 3 or more runes. And, like, I did it against my buddy who played IU, the guy who came in second at the Tokyo GP. He was not playing IU that round, I think. He was playing something fun. But he was kind of like, oh, you're dead next turn. I'm at 4,000. Can't do anything about it. And so we kind of learned through that experience that, no, Welser can OTK from, like, 3 will. So it's just a matter of having the right access to stuff. And so I love, and I think he looks super cool. Ishisho has the Dark Elf Freyla. I think Beelzebub is really cool. I love Elixir, the Dark Majin there or whatever. I love the idea of, like, the additions do stuff for the cards. I wish some of the effects took into account how expensive they are, because, for example, we have right now the blue-green ramp spell that draws a card, and then we have the addition that puts one into play. Now, of course, the addition stays out there and has an effect for Welser's Judgment, but it's really hard to justify either of those when we have Ataraxia that gives a creature swiftness, cost 2, and is repeatable ramp every turn. So it's a real, like, hard issue for me to be like, why would I run this when there's a almost strictly better version of this card? And so I feel like design went a little bit too much top down and didn't consider the practicality of that. For Rhea 3, I loved Scheherazade. Actually, I loved all three of them. What they were meant to be. Like,
Yeah.
I love Scheherazade as a character. I think it's super cool to have, like, books and stuff. The doll thing didn't really do anything for me because that wasn't ever really her thing. I get, like, creepy dolls, and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But, like, I didn't feel like that was even necessary. Like, it just... She could have had Grimoire, remove all the doll stuff on the quick cast and the tutoring them out, getting one from the graveyard, and just bouncing something, and she would still be playable. Like, that's... I think they pushed her too much, but I like the idea of Scheherazade. I love Aimu. I think invert cards are cool. Logistically, they're a pain in the butt, and I really don't like that. I hate having to take, like, my cards out, and I've actually started doing, like, I don't know, you won't be able to see it now, but I've been taking all my full art invert cards and just making, like, a side deck of them. So I was watching some Japanese players, and when they play, essentially when the card inverts, they just replace them with full arts that they have set off to the sides. And I don't know if, like, in the USA that's a viable thing because of all the cheating and whatnot, but I love that kind of concept just because it's like, I triple sleeve my cards, it's a pain in the butt to take them out and flip them over. So, and then Scarlet, I think, just is so cool. She has so many different ways. She can do the Meteor combo, she can be Reanimator, she can be aggro. Null is an interesting yet a little bit weak mechanic, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. So I think R3 had a ton of really interesting stuff. They didn't necessarily execute perfectly on it, but that was good. And for R4, honestly, I'm not a big fan of a ton of... I like Time Spinning Witch. I think she's interesting, but I don't like the Colossal Rulers just because, again, it opening up the card is a pain in the butt, and then it, like, doesn't lay flat sometimes. And it's like those little things bug the crap out of me. So, like, I'm big about, like, logistics and how it looks and how it feels and how the game experiences are. And that's one thing that kind of bugs the crap out of me. Like, she could have just honestly had her Judgment and turn into Time Spinning Witch, the one that lets you re-Judgment, and just say, like, this card can't battle or something, and I would have been totally fine with that. But, so be it.
I'm a sucker for gimmicks, so I really like that.
And that's what... That one is obviously... It's just not designed for me, honestly. Like, and we've talked about this before, but, like, not everything is made for everyone, and I think if you expect to like every card, you're going into a card game wrong. Like, there are... I talk with our translator often. I talk with a couple people often because I'll be like, I'm afraid of this card, or I think I need to ban this card. And they're like, it's fine, dude. Don't worry about it. It's actually nothing. But it's just, I come at the game with a certain perspective, and I try to have a pretty broad perspective, but there are still things that, like, I either disagree with or I can't get behind completely, and so it helps to bounce those ideas around. And I would rather us have a game where people love the thing they love, even if they don't always, like, it's not always viable, rather than just, yeah, that's okay, whatever. I'm kind of not very passionate.
Yeah. We'll do one more question here. Did Oscar or Joey have any last thoughts before I ask that question?
I don't know how much of this you can answer, and it's fine if you just blow it away, but what kind of stuff have you like been able to stop that would have come through R&D, like, or that would have been created, like, well, that's too strong, let's not do that type of situation? Is there anything you can share at all?
So, as far as new Valhalla goes, they've been more they've become more and more receptive, essentially. That I was actually thinking about making an article to talk about this kind of stuff, like, in more detail, because it's hard to just say without the context of, like, and cards change all the time, like, in development. And so what I'll reference some things that I've complained about that made it through, and other things that I'll talk about that you maybe will see in spoilers coming. Like, for example, when I got the card list for R3, it was already printed at this time, but I immediately was like, Lorite is ridiculous, and this is too much for a single card. Or at least what he does to the cost of the card is too low. I complained about Shahrazad being a little bit all over the place. I complained about Rachel not having a death trigger as opposed to, a leaves the field ability. Those were some of my big ones. In R4, actually, I had a big complaint about Cecile, or Seal, or whatever, Faith thing, basically. And even though the card isn't broken per se, the only thing keeping that card in check is Lorite. And it bugs me to some degree. Like, I don't like for a card to be that flexible and for that low of a judgment to have that many different effects. Like, it bothered me that showcased that green did everything, and it was just what the card represented, not necessarily that the power level was absurd. Like, it actually is kind of difficult to make the auras work effectively, and I think being so weak to Lorite is a thing, but I just don't like the fundamentals of why is a green card drawing cards, making tokens, untapping lands, doing damage, and all that. It's just like, why? Stop. No. Like, what are you doing? And just that bugged me, and so I complained about that. I complained about Resuscitating Will, the untap for 1, and I know that's not like a broken card, but with IU, that's like a 2-card OTK off of just a judgment. And I understand that, like, it's not breaking the game or anything, but at the same time, that's one of those cards that's like, that's one card away from being totally bonkers. And, like, even with something like Panda, I mean, I know Panda's not really throwing down right now, but, like, Panda can untap himself once already, toss in that in color, and that's very powerful. Like, and I'm okay with people building around cards, and I get that it doesn't draw cards, and it's quick cast, so it's weak to Fair Spell and blah, 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 but it just, that to me is kind of that's a direction I don't like to go in. I would rather, being the guy who kind of watches the ban list for the most part, like, I tend to err on the side of caution. I understand, like, new exciting cards are good, and then it's kind of up to the player base to decide how good they actually are. But there are times when I'm just like, I'm not cool with that power level. Like, I would like a little bit less. For something like Zero, I'm cool with Zero. I like her. I like that it takes a second for her to flip, so it's not automatically all your stuff has protection. You have a turn to interact with her, and then after that, then she's a pain in the butt to get rid of. But so that part's okay. As far as new stuff goes, I had a lot more ability to kind of complain about stuff, so to speak, and like, one of the direct comments was, "Are you trying to punish green?" And I said no, but you have to understand the standard you've been operating at is not equivalent to the other colors. And so some of the cards that you will see coming are, people might say, like a weaker version of other things, and that's okay. And honestly, like the way we've kind of designed a lot of cards coming up is that the resonators that are like boom, wow, holy crap, are a little bit more expensive as far as will cost than they have been in the past, but the trade-off is they're pretty impactful. You guys saw Belial, and it's like, if you drop him, especially with the way you know how Enter works now, he's a homeboy that's like, yo, sup, I nuked the field, I'm still here, and you're going to take continuous damage for the rest of the game, not to mention I'm a 12/12 flyer. So, like, that's cool, but that's a 6-cost card, and at the minimum, when you're almost dead, he's a 3-cost. I'm okay with having high impact, high cost resonators, and you're going to kind of see that across the board. And like Lancelot, he's very strong, but his impact comes from having a big field. If you only have Lancelot and you play him on turn 3, you're not really blowing anybody away with that. It's like, oh damn, you have 1 counter. Cool, 3-drop 7/7, bro. But should you have a field or you play it mid to late game, then he becomes a more serious threat. So I think that style is a result of my kind of direct input on this is more what I'm comfortable with. Also, things I talked about, like not have, you're going to see the card revealed at some point that you'll be able to pick out really easily what it could have been as far as the instant speed discard. You'll also see, like, I'm expecting a couple cards people will complain about because I complained about them, but the fact that some of them are limited to essentially once per game or twice per game mean that, okay, this isn't as absurd as it first appears. Or you realize, oh, I actually have to really consider that I don't have 4 copies of this, and I might be a regular deck, but I have IU level restrictions on the use of some of those cards. And I'm still expecting there's 1 or 2 cards that people are like, how did this get printed? But, and I think you guys can appreciate this too, like, of course we want to keep power level in check, but you still want to make things exciting. You don't want it to be boring. Like, I know Colin has complained about, like, vanillas just being like, why did you print this card? And sometimes it's sometimes it's for draft, sometimes it's like a common slot, sometimes the art. But the other side of it is, like, you can't have a good card without a bad card, and so, like, if everything is good, that is power creep, and so you need to have kind of that balance. And I think making exciting cards leads to good game experiences, and one of the user experiences that I really consider the most valuable is win or lose, I want you to have fun playing the game. And so even if you lose the game, I want you to be able to be like, I did something cool, and I want to do that again, and maybe next time I can win doing that. And I think when we get too many answers, too many strong counterspells, it tends to lean towards like, wow, that was boring. I got all my spells countered and then did nothing. Woo! And honestly, that's why in Wander, I've kind of taken a really harsh approach to a lot of the counters, because I want players to be able to play their spells. Even if they're doing combo shenanigans, that is an experience over, hey, look, nothing I played, or nothing, I couldn't play anything, all my spells were countered, and I died. That was so much fun. I don't want to play again. Like, honestly, my way of playing Magic is like that. I love to play Trinisphere and start destroying their lands. I'm like, hey, isn't this fun? But I'm not worried about the user experience of a guy who's played Magic for 20 years or 25 years, because it's like, you know what you came into when you spent 10 grand on a deck, so I'm not worried about your feelings. In Force of Will, I care about actually the user experience people are having, and I want that to be a good experience. And so that's kind of the way we go. And there's a balance to that, though, because, like, all right, Lucifer has a lot of discard effects. Jeff, you just said discard isn't fun. But if you do it in an interesting way where it's not just like, oh wow, cool, I couldn't play anything, this is lame, then I think you start to have more interesting effects. If you have so for example, graveyard interactions that deal with bringing stuff back from the graveyard, oh cool, I hope you're playing discard against me because you're just making my job easier. And so having, again, those answers where, okay, you have a powerful effect, but we have a ruler that is very good against that type of stuff. So
going into the final question, it kind of piggybacks off of that. So you're talking about the sort of user experience, and that was one of the things that I've always, one of my biggest complaints against Sherry was the fact that, especially at the local level, that people, it's not just, oh, you're getting beat by this deck, you're getting beat by a deck, and also you're not being able to play your deck because it passively counters every card you're going to play. And so on that note, I was hoping we could get a sort of final sort of word or thoughts on why there ended up not the decision not to ban Sherry. We had there was a push of people assuming she was going to be banned after the low showing in Collinsville and Tokyo GP, but the high top 8 placements and stuff like that. So was there a specific reason or that they decided not to go with that?
Let me think about this, like how to express this. So, number one I will address is the no emergency ban was essentially like I was lingering on that to some degree. One thing that you have to take into account is that there is more than just the U.S. community, and for example, in Japan, the ban Sherry percentage of the player base from kind of some polls that I put out, and I think you probably saw them, was about 57%, which means 43% were still on board and said the meta was healthy. When I was at Tokyo GP, everyone was like, "Oh no, I like this. I think pre-ban she was too strong, but now I think this is a healthy metagame." And so, being that most of the company is Japanese, my push for and I again go to them with the data, and generally they support my decisions, but in this case, one of the big things is, Japanese love to follow the rules, and so an emergency banning that we don't right now have a provision for in the ban rules that I set up, there wasn't a particular rule that we could point to in order to justify it. And since then, I have discussed with the team, and I've created a kind of a rule system that we can broadly apply, but still with the flexibility to do what we just need to do. But the idea being that certain thresholds are breached, we can at least start having the conversation. And I think it's inarguable that R3 meta was broken as hell, and something had to have happened. And actually, I was working on that list up until the day I announced it to the spoiler team, and I was talking with Japan, with Europe, and with the US about kind of what to do, and I'm generally very conservative with my New Frontiers ban lists, but I ended up adding a little bit more just because it was she is disgusting. And I had my old Sherry deck built that I was using for testing, and I went through it and I was like, well, I can just take out basically 16, 20 cards out of that deck and making the new version, and it's still viable, but that shows you how much she was gutted. And to be fair, it did lower her percentage 20, 30 points almost. So it's not when people say it didn't do anything, it absolutely did. Statistically, it had a huge impact, but just not enough to where I think people wanted it to be. And I think you guys have talked about it. Jeremy's group there talked about it. There wasn't enough incentive to push people off of the deck rather than just making a new version of it, because nothing hard countered it. So it was, why bother learning a new deck, building a new deck, buying a new deck, when I can just adjust the deck I currently have and it will be good enough for 9 out of 10 games. And so I think that was the R4 issue, because you're actually seen in Cluster, she hasn't been so much of an issue. Now, I've talked with AG specifically and kind of the team going forward that even I said for the Tokyo GP that she made up about 30% of the players, but she made up 75 or 80% or 60%, something, 75% of the actual top 8. And so her win ratio is disproportional to what any other ruler should be. And so I've raised that concern, and I'm hoping to address that in some capacity with the coming rotation. And so obviously a lot of things are going to change. Like there's so much that's going to change that I can't even discuss all of it. But like new cards are affected in different ways, and the format itself is changing, and the rune decks are going to exist, and there's all kinds of things that are going to happen. But at the same time, like, I'm very cognizant of what is happening, what has happened, and I think the knee-jerk reaction of wanting E-bans is not unreasonable from the player's perspective, but when we have essentially scheduled banned announcements, it's unlikely outside of like turn 0 kills that we will make emergency bans. Like, I think that was kind of the agreement that we came to in one of the meetings, was that we want players to feel like they don't have to worry that we're going to invalidate their purchase based off of one event, or just like kind of player outcry alone. And player outcry is important. Yes, absolutely. I do hear you and see you, and it is good to voice your opinion, but it needs to be backed by data, and it needs to fit within the paradigm of we are a company, and so we don't move as fast as public opinion. And so, like, just for example, to publish a ban list, I have to go through like 6 or 7 different people and then talk to the company on top of that. So, like, I think people underestimate my predecessor and even my own, like, the amount of time and effort that goes into a ban list is not minimal, and with everything else going on, making those knee-jerk, like, minor adjustments are not feasible. And so it really becomes, once every 3 months is a product of those entire 3 months. So, and of course, if we do get something like the Papa Gill, Cheshire Cat's Assistance, like, you're dead with no hand on the first turn, that, yeah, of course, I'll be like, yo, we gotta make a change. Don't give me lip, just do it, kind of thing. Outside of that, you're probably gonna see, like, very typical ban list adjustments moving forward. Hopefully, going into the new cluster, there won't be too much, like, I don't foresee having to deal with any of the new cards, but just kind of adjustments that, you know what, some of the old things maybe weren't accounted for, or just were more powerful than we expected with new stuff, etc. And so we'll make adjustments based on that. But I said it in Reddit, I think, or whatever last night, that, like, people were, oh my god, what if this breaks the game? Like, okay, have you noticed that since I've joined the company, every 3 months you've had a new ban list where things have been adjusted? It's not that we're just letting the format turn to crap when it's bad anymore. I'm actively trying to adjust. Now, the Wanderer versus New Frontiers ban lists are controlled slightly differently, and that's fine, but you can see that there is effort on the company's behalf, whereas there's no just, oh, we printed Reflect Refrain and then just let it ruin the game for 9 months. Like, there's actively discussion going on, and moves are being made. Sometimes conservative, but I would rather be on the conservative side than kind of the other, just because people are paying money to play with their cards, and it is absolutely not my intention to make their purchase invalid. And so I want people to have a good experience, and it is fun once in a while to play with some broken shit. Everybody loved Sherry for like the first couple weeks, and then they're like, oh my god. And so I think there is that balance there, and it's just a matter of getting the right balance. And I agree, the Scheherazade ban didn't completely accomplish what I wanted, and my goal wasn't to ban her out of existence. It was just to put her on par with other rulers, but I underestimated players and the deck itself's power. So it's a learning process for everybody.
Yeah. Oscar?
No, that's all I had.
Thanks for coming on then.
No problem. Can I do a little PR push?
Yeah, good.
So essentially, I'm going to try and post it either today or relatively soon. But my goal is I would like to host some untapped events, and for 5 different formats. I would like to have one for Cluster, New Frontiers, Wanderer, Origins, and Epic Stories. Ooh. And so we would be one-on-one Epic Stories. I don't know if that breaks the game at all, but essentially, I would love to have a 5 format tournament, and part of that is I was going to call it the Uber League, but essentially I have some promos that you can't see them because you can't see my video, but I have a pile. So I have a Japanese Uber Scarlet, Japanese Uber Aimul, Japanese Uber Shayla, Uber Kirik, and Uber Scheherazade, and I might change some of those depending on what I can find or what I have in my own personal collection, but essentially adding those to the prize pool. And something that people might be also interested in is, on top of that, I have some of the Ascended Rulers as additional prizes. So Priscia, Alsaris and Alice, and then Booty Cat, and I'm still trying to figure out the black one, maybe Abdul, and some Japanese Melfies and some other goodies. So I'm trying to put together a little prize pool for those events. There would be no entry fee, but just a way to get people kind of playing online, to have people have a chance to experience the game, and with actual prizes that are hopefully enticing or at least interesting. And I think it would be fun to give people a chance to use Origin format decks to maybe build up the competitive, or at least the awareness of Epic Stories a little bit, and even Wanderer, to let people kind of brew some interesting stuff and see what's available. So that will be coming soon. There'll be an announcement for that, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. And thank you again for being here, and thank you for everybody who is still listening and still here, and we'll see you all next time.
Very good. Take care.